Hey everyone, this is Bo. Over the past month, I've been building these A-frame shelves you see behind me. I want to share that building experience with everyone with videos. So there's going to be a multi-part video showing the progress and tracking all the construction details of these two shelves behind me. But first, before I jump into that, I'll give you some of the overalls, some of the overview of what the construction looks like and the sizes. So, give you an idea. This is 29 inches wide. It's about 84 inches tall, and at the bottom, the lower shelf is 20 inches deep. It's primarily constructed out of maple, which makes up the A-frame, the A-frames on the side. The maple also makes up the shelf supports and the lower stretcher in the bottom. The shelf panels themselves are made from maple, or from walnut, excuse me. I'll zoom in a little bit here to show you some more of the details. So as I spoke, the A-frame support on the side, it's got loose tenons. The shelf supports themselves have box joints in the back, which are hard to make out. You can kind of see them through here. And then the lower stretchers have a dovetail holding them in. They span left to right. The shelves, as I spoke, are in grooves. The panels then have a small rabbet cut into them to fit inside that groove, and they're a pretty tight fit in there. But I also added one screw in the very center to keep that shelf from sliding out. It's in an elongated hole to allow for any seasonal movement. The panels themselves are made from walnut. They are book matched. You can see probably the best example of that are the ones on the very bottom, since they have the largest panel. You can kind of see where the glue line is, somewhere right in here. Some of the panels, larger panels, did have a couple of checks on the end. I couldn't cut off, so I did put some dovetail keys, butterfly keys, whatever you want to call them, in there to keep the check under control. As well as this one above it has a dovetail in there as well. The video series will be multi-part. There's too much content I recorded to put in one long video, so it'll be somewhere 3 to 4 videos showing from milling lumber to doing some of the final assembly today, which was putting on these little custom leveling feet that I made. Since the A-frame supports are such thin stock, I couldn't use store-bought ones since the thread insert would be too big. That's it. Enjoy the videos. After I initially cut down my lumber to rough length, I'm using a handheld planer to get one of the edges roughly straight. After this, I will go to the bandsaw and cut everything to rough width. But I would like one of the edges to be fairly flat, so I'm not cutting a big banana in all my boards. And instead of running them across the jointer, I'm just using the handheld one here, just to quickly flatten things out. And after that first one, I just continue this process for each board. Even though the video's jumping, I do have to plane every single one of these straight. So after I get done flattening that one edge with the handheld planer, I then move on to my bandsaw, where I am rough cutting all these pieces to width. The width in this point is about 2¼ inches. between 2 1/4 and 2 1/8. I want to end up with a finished width of 2 inches, and see I'm just cutting the bandsaw here. The next step in the process was to joint the faces and the edges. I had to move my joiner to the middle of the garage due to these really long rail sections. And here you can see I'm setting on my infeed and outfeed supports. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage of me jointing these pieces because I turned off the camera when I thought I was turning it on. So you can see me set up the joiner, and then you'll miss all the fun and excitement of jointing these long pieces. After planing the lumber down, or the long rails down, I felt like they were way too heavy, thick visually, so I took them to the bandsaw and I resawed them in half. So I ended up with essentially 2 3/4 inch rail sections from one of these large pieces of 8/4 maple. Alright, so I'm starting by resawing what will later be the shelving pieces from some 4/4 walnut. I built a resaw fence here, just previously doing this resawing itself, because my fence on my bandsaw was not tall enough. I was pretty nervous about resawing this walnut, but it turned out really well. After resawing all the walnut, I moved back to the A-frame support itself, and here I'm ripping all the maple boards to width at 2 inches. I'm doing the shorter ones first, and then I move on to the longer ones where I have to actually move my bandsaw out of the way to get the length of boards into the garage. After ripping the boards to width, it was time to start figuring out the lengths of the individual pieces. So what I'm doing here is I'm first laying out that lower stretcher from the workpiece, but with how flexible those workpieces or those the vertical supports were, it didn't work out too well. So you'll see here I cut it to length based on my layout lines, and then I double check it with the math I did previously, and they're just not lining up. So what I ended up doing was trusting the math and what the length should be, and not what the actual layout was. You can see here where I'm double checking the math. After I got all the dimensions worked out on the support pieces, I moved on to cutting the mortises in the A-frame supports themselves. Here I'm doing some end grain pieces in the short stretchers on the top. I will then move on doing the long stretchers, the long vertical pieces, and doing the mortises there. I've previously done all the layout lines and everything like that, so now it's just a matter of setting them up in the jig, routing them through. Alright, so I got all the mortises routed in, small pieces, big pieces, end grain, side grain, edge grain, whatever you want to call it. The next step is to finish making the loose tenon stock. And so what I have here are some oak strips that I ripped out of a small piece of oak I had that I jointed, planed, and then resawed on the bandsaw to get it to about a 1/4 inch. As you can see, they're not all consistent. I think these two are probably the thinnest, closest to a 1/4 inch, and these were the other halves that are a little thicker. So I'm just going to take one of these and just make sure that they are not too small already, and they don't fit into the mortises. So let's go check that out. Let's find one. Ugh, they're everywhere. All right, so what you can see if I get real close there It definitely does not fit. It's too wide, so which is good because I'm going to plane it all down with the planer. So this is kind of a slow and steady process. I'll just keep passing them through. Once I get this all planed to the proper thickness, I'll keep testing it back and forth. But once I get it planed to the proper thickness, I will then rip it to the appropriate width so it fits in the mortises I cut, and then I will take a round over bit in my router table and route over the top and bottom edges on all four edges here so it fits into the oval shape that the router left. And then the last step will be to cut them to the appropriate length for the mortises I cut. So as you can see here, I'm sneaking up on the fit to make sure that that tenon stock fits tightly in the mortise. I use the digital gauge on the planer, but really it comes down to fitting the actual piece within the mortise. Alright, so here goes the final fitment. A nice snug fit inside that mortise. I like to test not only the end grain pieces, but the edge grain or long grain pieces as well. Once I got the mortises all cut and the tenon stock ripped to size and cut to length and rounded over, it was time to move on to the glue up. So here I'm just filling the mortises with glue, put some glue on the tenons, tap them in, and clamp everything together. I have some small knife marks on the vertical pieces where the rail should end up, that lower one. Since there's no edge that's real close, I have some knife marks that I'm aligning to. And here I am taping on those wedge pieces. And finally applying some clamps to the top. And then I'll move on and apply the clamp to the bottom. Just doing some glue cleanup here as well. Thanks for watching the first video in this build series. Please stay tuned for upcoming videos. Feel free to like or subscribe and leave me any comments.